It was a moonless night when I pulled my trusty Volkswagen Westfalia into the streets of San Francisco. I had been on the road for hours, driving down from Portland, Oregon, fueled by the allure of the Haight-Ashbury district, a place that had always fascinated me. My 23-year-old self had been living in that van for 3 months, and I relished the freedom it offered. As the clock struck 2 in the morning, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I scoured the steep streets of San Francisco for a spot to spend the night. It had to be a quiet one, safe enough to get a few hours of sleep. After some searching, I found an ideal spot along the street. It was a steep hill, and I hoped the incline would discourage anyone from bothering me. I nestled into my cozy van, locking the doors before closing my eyes, the rhythmic sound of my own breathing lulling me into a slumber. The gentle sway of the van as it settled into the uneven street was oddly comforting. However, my tranquility was short-lived. I was roused from my dreams by the sound of hushed voices. 2 distinct male voices were engaged in conversation right outside my van. My heart raced as I strained to listen. My ears perked up, my senses on high alert. It didn't take long to realize that these men weren't just talking. They were attempting to get inside my van. I heard the unmistakable sound of someone jiggling the handle of my driver's side door, then moving to the passenger side, and finally to the sliding side door. Panic coursed through me as I realized they were trying to break in. Thankfully, I had locked every door before settling in for the night. My mind raced. Thoughts scrambled for a solution. Who were these people? What did they want from me? The darkness outside of my windows shrouded their intentions, and I held my breath, praying they would give up and go away. But they were determined, and the minutes felt like an eternity as they continued to tamper with my van. The situation took a turn when one of them produced a crowbar and some other tools, then scraping sounds of metal against metal. These weren't just curious passerbys, these guys meant business. I couldn't stay frozen in fear any longer. I had to act. I quietly slid into the driver's seat, my fingers fumbling for the keys. As I turned them in the ignition, the van roared to life. The sudden revving of the engine jolted the would-be intruders, their hooded figures illuminated by the van's headlights. Panic spread across their faces, and I watched as they bolted down the street, disappearing into the darkness. I wasted no time. I pulled away from the scene as fast as the narrow streets of San Francisco allowed, my heart still pounding in my chest. I drove a few miles to a grocery store parking lot, where I felt a semblance of safety. That night I couldn't sleep. Fear gnawed at my every thought, and the realization of how vulnerable I was hit me like a ton of bricks. This story was no campfire tale. It was a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows for solo van lifers like me. Since that night, I've become vigilant in choosing my parking spots. I meticulously check out my surroundings and listen to my instincts. I also carry bear mace with me at all times, a last resort for self-defense. I share this story not to scare others away from the freedom of van life, but as a warning to fellow women who choose this lifestyle. Be cautious, trust your gut, and stay safe on the open road. The allure of adventure should never come at the expense of your well-being. My life had always been on the move, and I embraced the open road as my home. Living full-time in my converted camper van, I had traversed the vast expanse of the United States, chasing horizons and adventures. I had heard about Slab City from a captivating YouTube video, a place where society's outcasts and those running from the law sought refuge in the unforgiving desert. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to make a brief stop, planning to stay for just a week. Slab City's makeshift library, a dusty refuge for wayward souls, was where I found myself on that sweltering afternoon. I looked through the weathered pages, sharing stories and the occasional laughter with other fellow travelers and those who lived here full-time. But tranquility was a fleeting illusion in Slab City, as I would soon discover. 2 men, their gaunt faces marked by the unmistakable sign of meth addiction, cornered me amidst the bookshelves. Their eyes were wild, and their voices trembled with paranoia. "You're acting strange, man," one of them hissed, the words laced with suspicion. "You some kind of undercover cop?" I was dumbfounded, caught off guard by the bizarre accusation. No, I'm just passing through," I stammered, attempting to defuse the situation. But their delirious minds refused to accept reason. Fearing a confrontation, I rose from my seat and left the library, desperate to avoid escalating tensions. The two men watched me go, their eyes following my every move. Night came, bringing with it an eerie stillness. I sat by my dwindling campfire, haunted by the encounter earlier. It was then that my heart fell as the two men from the library re-emerged from their shadows. One of them clutched a baseball bat, while the other had a menacing Bowie knife strapped to his belt. They approached my campsite, eyes glazed with malevolence, and their demand was simple: money and my precious generator. Panic gripped me, and I knew I had to think fast. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I hurled the beer bottle I was drinking from straight at the face of the knife-wielding man. Catching him off guard, the bottle struck him, shattering on impact and drawing a cry of pain. Seizing my moment, I sprinted toward my van, slamming the doors shut and locking them behind me. Inside the van, I frantically reached for my concealed .22 caliber pistol. I aimed it towards the intruders, my voice trembling as I warned them to step back or face the consequences. But their drug-addled minds refused to yield to reason. The man with the baseball bat began pounding on my van, the blows cracking the windshield and shattering the passenger side window. Desperation washed over me, and I fired 2 warning shots through the shattered glass, sending sparks into the night. The gunshots echoed through the desolation of Slab City. The attackers finally retreated into the shadows, disappearing like shadows in the night. As the echoes of the gunshots faded, I realized the gravity of what had transpired. However, I dared not report the incident to the police, for my possession of the firearm was illegal. With trembling hands, I started my van and left Slab City behind, the memories of that night etched into my soul. My life had been defined by the freedom of the open road, but that night, I had faced a darkness that lurked beyond the horizon. Slab City, a place where society's rules held no sway, had shown me a side of the world I could never have imagined. A lawless abyss where survival was paramount and secrets were buried in the unforgiving sands of the California desert. In the summer of 2019, my wife and I found ourselves living life on the road, chasing adventure and freedom in our converted van. It was a cozy little home on wheels, complete with solar panels for electricity, a sink, and a toilet. Our nomadic journey led us to the picturesque town of Mount Shasta in Northern California, a place filled with mystique and New Age vibes. We spent our days hiking through the lush forests, exploring the New Age shops that lined the streets, and immersing ourselves in the town's enchanting aura. We couldn't resist buying a few books on spirituality and some crystals that spoke to our souls. The highlight of our visit was a trek to a small stream, its icy waters flowing from the snow-capped peak of Mount Shasta itself. We filled our bottles with that pristine spring water, savoring its purity. As the sun was setting on our last night at the campground, a sense of tranquility settled over us. The forest around us came alive with nocturnal sounds, and our van, nestled among the tall trees, provided a comforting sanctuary. We were snuggled up in our van, ready to embrace a restful night's sleep when we heard it, a rustling outside. It sounded like something heavy was pushing against our van, causing it to sway gently. My heart raced as I turned to my wife, who was equally terrified. We knew we weren't alone. I gathered my courage and shouted, "Hey, get away from the van!" My voice quivered with fear, but I hoped it would deter whatever intruders were lurking outside. For a brief moment, the forest fell silent, and the only sound was the pounding of my heart. Then it began, a barrage of small sticks and rocks, pelting our van from all sides. I peeked out of the window, and my blood ran cold. 2 massive hairy figures stood in our campsite, throwing objects with uncanny precision. It was as if they were trying to get our attention. My wife was now trembling beside me. She whispered, "What are those things?" I could hardly believe it myself, but I knew what I was looking at. A pair of creatures that could only be described as a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Their towering forms, covered in matted hair, moved with an eerie grace. We covered in our van, trying to remain as silent as possible. These creatures had been nothing more than legends, stories passed down through generations, but now they were here, just outside our window. The larger of the 2 Bigfoot creatures continued throwing objects, while the other was rummaging through our camp gear scattered outside our tent. It was a surreal and terrifying spectacle. My wife, in her desperation to document this extraordinary event, slowly reached for her phone. As she grasped it, her fingers brushed against the shutter and took a picture, and the flash went off. The creature froze. In that moment, I knew our intention had been detected. The creatures turned towards the van, their eyes reflecting the dim light from inside. We locked eyes with them. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the Bigfoot creatures vanished into the dense woods, leaving us with only our shaken nerves and a tale that would be met with skepticism by many. We had no photographic proof, just the vivid memories of that unforgettable night. It had seemed they were scared of getting their picture taken. We left Mount Shasta the next morning, our hearts heavy with a mix of disbelief and awe. We knew what we had seen, even if no one else would. Our adventure on the road continued, but nothing would ever match that eerie encounter we had with that mysterious creature in the Mount Shasta wilderness.